How's everyone? Hey Jason, Kate, I'm adding you all on. Alfred as well. I've just invited you to speak. So if you can accept. Hey Jason.
Hey Micol. Hey Kate.
Hey Kate.
Hey guys.
How are we? Happy New Year.
Happy
Can
New
say
Year.
that?
Busy.
Hi Fanny.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I've just
Fanny.
Jason! Kate! Yeah, we're gonna see us very soon, Fanny.
I know! That's so cool.
Yes,
I just took my tickets, but yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, Jason. Hi, Kate. Hi, Micol. Hi, Jessie.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
And
cool.
Alfred Weidinger is also in the audience. Can we also bring him up? Oh, I can do that. I'm the co-host.
Yes, I just invited him. He needs to accept or request. Hey,
And
Jessie.
we have Eddie.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Who else do we have on? Tina, right? We're waiting on as well.
Yes, we're waiting. But
Can I see?
She might be late. She's in a meeting. Tina might be a few minutes later.
Awesome. Hi, MP.
Ria.
Can you hear us? Maria Paula, are you there?
I'm here. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Great. All right. Okay, just for, sorry, before we start, just for reference, I have added the recording of this, just to make everybody aware. I hope that's okay with everybody. If it's not, let me know and we can stop it. Silence is okay? Okay, awesome. Okay, perfect. Anika, did you manage to get Alfred on? Yep.
Yeah, I just texted him. Yeah, he invited. I just texted him via WhatsApp to please accept. He's done that. Good evening to Linz in Austria.
Hello, good evening, everybody.
Is the director of the museum who initiated the proof of art exhibition curated by Jessie Damiani, who is our co-host.
Amazing.
Hello, hello, Jessie.
Long time.
Oh, Eddie still needs to accept the invite to speak. Eddie, could you please accept the invitation that we have you on here with us?
In the meantime, do we want to start with a quick round of intros, maybe?
Yes, let's do that, and maybe let's briefly say while we're here, thank you everyone. Exactly, thank you everyone for tuning in. I mean, we had all of us know who are on Twitter like every day. We know that the topic of this space needs curation. It kept coming up, and then Micol and I got in touch, and Jessie and I were speaking about hosting a space, and Jason, I think you were speaking with Tina already on doing something like this and having a public conversation on Twitter Spaces about this topic. So we just thought let's make it happen now, and then we're very happy to have Maria from JPEG with us, who is quite a new project that works on new ways of curating in this space, and they got a funding. I think that was last week, right? I'm a bit lost when it comes to time.
That Friday.
That was last week. Congratulations, you got funding 3.8 million. So we're very excited to have you here and to hear more on what you're working. So we were thinking that it would be good if each one of our speakers does a very brief introduction of themselves, saying maybe when you got in touch with NFTs and what you are currently working on, that everyone knows who we are and what we're doing. Let's maybe start with Jason, who everyone in here probably knows already, but it's still good to hear from yourself.
Yeah. No, I'm sort of famous for talking too long, so I'm going to try to be quick. I'm Jason Bailey. People know me as Artnome. Been writing a blog about art and tech for about 5 years. Early collector in the NFT space. Have been very excited about the opportunities that NFTs open up. Got my start curating when Kate was nice enough to invite me to curate a show. I think it might have been 2018. Have done a handful, I guess, of live shows, and with the pandemic, a handful of online shows. And excited to learn from everybody today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jason. Maria, would you like to be next?
Yeah, for sure. So, hello everyone. I'm Maria Paula. I am a co-founder at JPEG, and I discovered NFTs in early 2018 and immediately incorporated them in some cultural festivals that I was organizing, the East Berlin festivals, together with my nonprofit vehicle here in Berlin, where I'm based. I started researching more and organizing discussions as well around, what is blockchain art, not only about NFTs, but that's when it got a little bit more serious. In early 2019, we published the first sort of like academic looking publication. I'm not going to claim it's academic, and continued along the line trying, to host shows, discussions, and educating people. I'm also a collector since 2018, but I didn't get really serious till last year. And yeah, finally in 2021, I was trying to, February 2021, I was in the middle of the lockdown here in Berlin, trying to finish the second paper. We saw that we couldn't update it, and that was because, like the whole boom was already exploding. So that's when I reached the point where I said, okay, I need to do something with the knowledge that I acquired, and got together with some people from the internet via Twitter DMs, and we founded JPEG. And JPEG is a curation protocol. I am not a curator, but I am building tools for curators and also for NFT enthusiasts that are not necessarily professionals, but that want to create something beyond the experience of ownership or transactional that NFTs are now offering.
Excellent, thank you very much. And funny enough, the two of us met at what was it titled NF Castle in Prague a couple of months ago. Yeah, that was great to meet you in person in Prague. And good evening, Kate. Nice to have you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting to speak. It's I think it's the first time I'm speaking actually on Twitter. Just a short introduction. My name is Kate Vass, as Jason already mentioned. I'm also an early adapter to the space and a dealer and a collector of both physical and digital. We've been hosting the physical show since 2017, focusing on art and tech, mostly generative art. And Jason has been very helpful in the couple of shows, and also like one of the iconic one which we hosted about the blockchain in 2018. And since then, just focusing on the program, curating further, and during pandemic mostly online, but also like looking at the physical spaces internationally to see new ways of how we can curate also NFTs. So I'm really happy to join the beautiful group of people, and I'm looking forward to a very nice discussion.
Thank you, Kate. And Alfred Weidinger, good evening.
Hello, everybody. I'm the director of the Upper Austrian State Museums, so including Francisco Carolinum and as well the OK Center for Contemporary Art in Linz, which is the city of Ars Electronica. Before I was a director of the Museum of Fine Art in Leipzig in Germany, and I asked Anika a couple of years ago to create 2 exhibitions on very contemporary media art. It was also Virtual Normality and Link in Bio, and both exhibitions were very successful and received very well by the younger generation of artists. And obviously this community was overlooked by museums till then. And I felt it was important to create a platform for up-to-date contemporary media art. And last year we did Proof of Art. Anika mentioned it already in Linz, created by Jesse Damiani, and two curators of my own. It became the world's first museum exhibition on the history of NFTs and digital art, and was a really very successful exhibition. In April 21, we acquired land in the Metaverse Crypto Voxels, where we opened the DFC. This is our digital location for NFTs and digital art. And we also hired a curator. It was Markus Reindl. He became the world's somehow first museum curator for the Metaverse. And right now we are preparing several exhibitions on digital art. This year, altogether 6 exhibitions. Anika will create a show about digital renaissance, and we'll realize the first exhibition on the cosmos of Crypto Wiener. It's an artist group from Vienna. Then we organize Non-Fungible Body. This is a performance festival somehow. We show a new virtual reality piece of Paul McCarthy. And finally, within the time frame of Ars Electronic in September this year, the exhibition Meta Space. And of course, the first edition of Art NFT Linz. So this is the short introduction, I would say. It's fine. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of projects in the making, which are interesting for the community. And somehow Eddie Wagenknecht has technical issues we couldn't solve right now or can't solve right now. I hope we'll be able to do that. In the meantime, I have invited Manuel Rosner so that we have also an artist with us who's heavily interested in curating. And hi, Manuel. Thank you for joining us so spontaneously.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the invite. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I do a little introduction, maybe. So I started, the first show I curated was when I was a student in 2012. It was a digital gallery in a replicated physical space, but like digitally rendered. It was called what we call painting, and I just invited, I don't know, Jeremy Bailey and a few other artists, and that was really interesting. And so later on, I've been working with König Gallery and you, Anika, on a great exhibition, and also multiple ones in the Central Land. And now I'm working on a project that is called Real World, so it's realworld.art. And I think yesterday I watched Matrix again, and so I know where I was inspired. I think I was 10 when it came out. And so, yeah, I don't know, they say, welcome to Real World. Maybe that's where the name is from. And my idea is to mix physical spaces with digital content. So in virtual reality, which I did together with Alfred Weidinger in MDBK Leipzig. And of course, NFTs changed a lot for me as well. I mean, I've been working with VR and digital spaces, but NFTs really are like a missing key or a missing piece of the puzzle to get this digital art world on the next level, I think.
Thank you, Manuel. And Micol, I think you take over from here now with the first round of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I can also briefly introduce myself. I don't think I have. So my name is Micol. I'm the founder and CEO of VerticalCrypto Art. We are a curatorial media studio, which was founded in June of 2020, and been working in this space ever since, supporting, curating a lot of different artists, both established, but also very focused on elevating emerging creators and giving space to a lot of new talent that we're seeing in the space. So I guess to kick us off, we kind of thought of maybe a couple of questions that we can share and to get us all speakers talking. Also, I think, Anika, sorry, but we didn't introduce Fanny now that I think about it, right? Because she was booted out. Fanny, have you introduced yourself yet? No, right?
No.
Okay.
But this,
Yeah. Go. No. Go for it. I want to give everybody. Yeah. Go for it.
All right. So very quickly, so we can start. I've been in touch with NFTs. This was Anika's question in 2018 via Snark.art and Kadaf digital art fair. And now I advise private collectors and artists and spend a lot of time writing and talking about the space. And just wanted to shout out to Micol, who actually had a whole series about curation on Twitter Space last year. I can't remember exactly when you started it, but it was all around the question that, we realized that people were having and the question was like, what does curation mean to you? And I'll let you go from there, Micol.
Yeah, actually, I can't believe that was already a year ago. That's crazy. But yeah, it was. It's the ever ongoing topic of curation. What does it mean? How does it what does it look like in the NFT space? But with this, I guess I will jump into the first question. So we were thinking of touching on the topic, which I guess gets discussed quite a lot, which is the democratization of the art world, and in which ways, if any, do NFTs democratize the art world and the art market? Who wants to kick us off with this?
That's a heavy one right out of the gate. I mean, I'm happy to sort of riff on it, and maybe that'll give folks time to do a better job of answering than I probably will. I think it's hard this year with the NFT space and blockchain art space growing so quickly to say definitively that it's democratized or hasn't democratized. You can look at pockets of the NFT space and say that things maybe have gotten worse, and you can look at other pockets and say that things have gotten better. My tendency, as someone who's pretty involved in the space, is that I'm seeing a lot of people that maybe would never have thought of collecting art before or even had an interest in art. And I think the counter to that, there are many people that would argue, well, these aren't collectors, they're just flippers, they're just buying these things because they're tokens, and they're not really interested. And my argument to that would be that we don't really know all these people, right? And the handful that I do know pretty well, a lot of them came in maybe thinking of NFTs just as a currency, but have become real appreciators of art and, have fallen in love with certain artists. And I think that's probably something that we want to encourage rather than kind of coming back at them and saying like, you're not a real collector or you're not doing this right, So I think there's some democratization on the collecting side that I'm excited about. People that maybe didn't think of themselves as collectors or someone who could be interested in art coming around to that. And then there are a lot of artists who maybe didn't have representation or couldn't find representation or support who are exploring the space with varied results for sure. And seeing if NFTs are a way for them to be able to get access to a larger audience. And I think that there are examples for sure of artists around the world who I know personally who feel like they wouldn't have been able to make it without NFTs. But the danger in talking about 1, 2, or 3 people is that that's not really necessarily a statistical representation, right? Me telling you about 1 or 2 artists in areas that, maybe aren't typically is tied into the traditional art market or art world doesn't necessarily represent what everybody's experiencing. So to kind of summarize or to end my thoughts on this particular question, I'd say part of what excites me isn't so much that it's all roses and that everything's perfect, but that it feels early enough that for those that want to try to build something new or to change the system, it's a little bit easier to change and adapt and be part of a new system when the rules haven't fully been laid out and the roles aren't fully clear yet, I think, than maybe kind of trying to come in and participate or change an old system. So I think that would be my thoughts.
Any other adding thoughts to this? Kate, I think we discussed this at NFT London, right? This topic. You had some ideas, right?
I always have ideas. No, honestly, I'm a little bit confused, now. Democratization and curating in the space of NFTs. I think there are like two different subjects. First is curating in general, and what does it mean, curate an exhibition, regardless of the medium, if it's NFT or if it's a physical show, and the quality of it. I mean, what we can bring as a curators to the space, to the audience, and how and how beneficial it is to the artists and to the collectors, right? And then there is another part is about how, what do I mean? Like how the space, NFT space evolved already for the last couple of years, and that we see, many artists. Some of them are still struggling. Some of them are taking more. How do you say, more successful in a way, you know, like, and for majority of them that does not necessarily means that if they come to NFT they automatically become successful and popular. So I don't know, like, I think we see a lot of gray area now. I'm not sure about, you know, like the democratization of the whole space for the collectors. Yes, it's good, you know, because we see a lot of newcomers and new generation picks up, you know, to collect NFTs. But at the same time, the quality of it is a big question mark. The quality of art, the quality of shows, the quality of what kind of how we define art, and how we how do you say, what is important, you know, like to show, to exhibit, to collect, you know. And I think, you know, these values, they are a little bit became blurry for the last year for sure, because of this commercialization of art. And this is the biggest issue that I'm struggling with, that, you know, like, where does it lead? Because if we have NFTs, we have as a like technology which enables us to collect or to trade natively digital artworks. At the same time, the commercialization of it, you know, like, we are lacking the quality, and we are lacking also the how do you say, it's easy to speak in the space when I don't see you guys, so I have to adjust my thoughts. The value of the whole as art in general, you know, like, where does this culture bring us, you know, like, what do we want to communicate with this medium and with the NFT space? And I think, you know, it's in our hands now as a curators or dealers or influencers in the space, and also the artists, you know, to communicate the right message of values in general. So yeah, maybe somebody can comment on that. I think Jesse had this conversation in Basel, in Miami, with Transfer Gallery, and Julia. Do you remember, Jesse? You had this conversation. I think you touched some of this issues as well, about, like, you know, what we can bring to the space and how we communicate it. So it's not even about the medium NFT. It's in general, like, what kind of message we bring to the culture and to the audience.
Yeah, and I guess I would use that as a springboard to open up to kind of another question that's been bopping around different Twitter threads, which is this idea around, is NFT curation different than digital arts curation? And so I'd love to throw to you, Kate, or Maria Paula, who've had kind of direct experience kind of curating, you know, before the NFT wave was a visible thing in the mainstream. And now still participating. How are you thinking about that difference, or is there one?
I can start by saying that, as I said, I'm not a curator. I'm trying to build infrastructure that helps people, professionals, and of course enthusiasts as well, curate, discover, create context, however you want to call it, into the NFT space. I've done art shows that were related to digital media as well, but never in the curating realm. From what I can see in the NFT space, I can see there's a lot of confusion because everything is very focused on ownership and transactions. So usually the people that are influencing other people's discovery experiences on what are great NFTs or not are people that hold huge bags. And there's obviously really nice also attempts on Twitter to try to discover and curate, but coupled with these attempts comes also this sort of like engagement farming sort of tweets that say drop your NFT here. So as more people get into the space and more confusing it is, then we need to create different infrastructures and obviously create the habits in people to sort out and collect and curate beyond what they own in their own wallets. This is what I focus, but yeah, I wouldn't know about digital art in general.
On that note, maybe we'll use this moment to have Dr. Tina Rivers Ryan introduce herself.
Hey, hi. Apologies for being late, precisely because I am a curator of digital art. I had an artist whose work I curated call me at like 1:58, and it was an incredibly urgent problem that had to be dealt with. So I'm sorry I missed the first part of this conversation. But yeah, I'm a curator of modern and contemporary art at the Albright Knox Art Gallery in Buffalo, New York, where I tend to focus on artists using media technology, so video art, digital art. I currently have an exhibition on view called Difference Machines, Technology and Identity in Contemporary Art, which is a survey of 17 artists who have been making work with new media technologies since the 1990s. And also as an academic, I am a researcher of the history of digital art, is what I wrote my doctoral dissertation about, the emergence of digital art and other forms of media art back in the 1960s. And some of you might have read some of my criticism of NFTs, but I am glad to be invited to be part of the dialogue in this space with you guys, because I do think that we all are very much invested in the future of digital art and digital technology, and I hope we can continue talking to each other.
I'd love to take the moment of your entrance to kind of echo the question that I just asked, because I think it's one that you can uniquely speak to, is this difference that is being brought up semantically around an NFT curator versus a digital art or media art or time-based media art curator. How are you thinking about that difference, or do you see one at all?
Well, one of the things I was arguing, a year ago is that I don't think it's a sort of meaningful distinction, that I think that people were talking about NFT art as if it was something sort of distinct from digital art, or more precisely, they were talking about NFT art as if it was the first kind of digital art, the first time that we were seeing digital art being curated, being exhibited. And I just was sort of a little allergic to some of that rhetoric, because I saw it as essentially erasing the really important work that's been done, not only by people from quote unquote the traditional art world, but also by people from the new media art space who have been exhibiting and curating this work for a long time. And so I was saying, look, there are people who have the competencies, who have the skills in order to talk about digital art. And that fundamentally, when you're talking about curating digital art or exhibiting digital art, whether it's online or IRL, you are talking about assets that in a way are fundamentally no different from the kinds of assets that we have been working with for a really long time. Like, we know how to curate JPEGs. That's something that we've all been doing. That said, over the past year, obviously, we've seen a rise in truly blockchain-based forms of art. We've seen the rise of, obviously, generative art platforms. And so I guess I would just add a little bit of a caveat to say that, yes, I actually, do think that now people are mobilizing blockchain technologies in a way that is particular and unique, and that we do need a language to talk about that. But as I see it, it's still very much under the umbrella of digital art. Like, for example, like net art is one kind of digital art. Bio art is one kind of digital art. And now we could maybe perhaps say that blockchain art is one kind of digital art. But not all NFTs are blockchain art. And terminology gets really tricky. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are certain NFTs that would require a curator to have more familiarity with blockchain technology. But I think for the case of a lot of NFTs, you're talking, if the associated asset basically is like a JPEG or a GIF or an MPEG-4 file or whatever, you're talking about something that should be comfortably within the wheelhouse of any curator of digital art. It's also obviously a social scene and a different set of artists and a different new canon that's forming. But in terms of competencies, like the ability of anyone from a sort of traditional media art space to operate in this space, I think we all have the skills that we need. And in fact, we might actually be more informed about some of the history and the precedents that might actually enrich the dialogues that we can have about this art and what exactly about it is novel and interesting, right? To give it some historical context and perspective. So I hope that our voices will continue to be sort of valued or sought out. While respecting the fact that, yes, there are new voices emerging from this space. I hope that answers your question, Jesse. I'm not sure that it did.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you for that. Alfred, I'd love to maybe throw to you as a sort of follow-up, because, you've hired Marcus as this metaverse curator who's, emphasizing NFTs in that curation. How are you thinking about that hiring and what new role that he's bringing to Francisco Carolinum and the Upper Austrian Museum Consortium in general?
Thank you. I asked this question myself over and over during the last few months. So I asked myself if art NFTs or their public presentation need curators. So till 21, nobody thought of it and nobody saw the need. Not until the mega deal made in the auction of people was a game changer and eye opener, and finally the main argument for me to answer the question. So the people auction was very well prepared, which means it was already curated. Someone carefully selected the specific NFT, rated it, sold it for a spectacular price, and provoked an effective media response. If you look at it this way, so you'll discover it was created like in the manual. It's shocking somehow. So the conservative art world was not prepared for this, and it has not regard to this day. And even progressive curators must realize how conservative they are regarding digital art. And yes, it is much more challenging for art historians to understand NFTs, blockchains, Web3, etc., for example, as Impressionism. So there are two options for curators now. So to be open for this new art form and learn from the new generation of artists what contemporary art means in the digital age, or hope it's a hype that will pass you by. Only it's not. So why the first option is a great option? Not because the curator is needed for the art itself, there's no need for, but it's necessary for the artist to become visible to the public and the market, which is a dilemma in a way, because as NFTs democratize the art world and the artwork market in some way. But even a democratic world needs structure, mediation, quality management, and so on and so on. This is why our curators more important than ever in this field. So this is also the reason why we hired Marcus as one of the first curators in the museum world for the metaverse.
I do have a follow-up question for you, because you've been the vice director of the Belvedere in Vienna and the Albertina in Vienna, so you have quite an impressive history when it comes to working with some of the most important art institutions. So do you really have the feeling that we can say, well, we observe right now the democratization of the art world? I mean, has really that much changed? What has really changed when it comes to curation, for example?
For me, so I work to the democratic process. As a matter of fact, before people, the entire process of creating an NFT, putting it on the market and being purchased by collectors was carried out in what can be called, in a kind of romantic way, democratic world or democratic process. So financial speculation and strategy were hardly an issue in the digital art world. So there was neither a business idea nor a business plan to be followed. Why? Because digital art was irrelevant for the traditional art market and its players, and therefore overlooked by museums and curators. So, but now the spotlight is on and rules apply. So after people, it became visible how many great digital artists there are. And curators in auction houses were the first, in my sense, to discover, to select and offer choices. They established NFTs as a contemporary art form. Due to them, NFTs became relevant outside the digital world. They have arrived in our analog reality. And there's definitely no democracy. So I guess this is answering your question in a way.
I can see we have a few hands up, and we also have a new speaker, which is Amir. Hi, Amir.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
Alfred, one thing that I wanted to question was, I mean, was the Beeple auction really creating a more democratic art world? Because to me, as an artist, it seemed like a highly orchestrated sale of a work by people who were actually in business with people and pumping their own coin. I mean, Beeple's work is actually a great reason to have curation in the NFT space, because anyone that's been involved in art knows that that work is not there's nothing groundbreaking or interesting. I mean, I've made work for 5,000 days in a row, you know, like that's what artists do. They make work every day. I mean, conceptually, there was nothing fantastic about that work. Formally, there was nothing groundbreaking in that work. It was purely a marketing, you know, it was more of a marketplace. So in my mind,
but this definitely killed democracy. Also, this work and the auction killed democracy in this world. This is what I'm feeling.
Wait, but I thought you said it was making it more democratic.
No. It was before. Before people, it was a kind of in a romantic way. I would say it was a kind of democratic process, and it was a democratic world. And then came people, and everything was the main issue was money, whatever. And it was, of course, it was a huge marketing spectacle. And then democracy ended. And as long as you have a curator, so there's no democracy, because it's one opinion. It's very subjective, and it's one opinion. It's not democracy. So it's not one asking people, what do you think? What do you mean? So this what we do right now. This is a way of democracy. So we are really, everyone is telling his opinion, and we are talking very nicely to each other. But this is a way of democracy. But people ended democracy in this field.
Can I add something to Alfred? What you just said. I think there's going back very concretely, what we've seen and what we talked with Elena from Kadaf actually was that artists in trying NFTs and entering the space are very confused. They're they don't know how to access better discovery, and get their work out there. So going back to what NFT allowed, even digital artists were making art before NFTs. NFT, of course, is a great delivery method for transacting digital art, but it is not at all a great discovery method. So and it quite evolved how you discover work over the last year, and we even seen a re-centralization on very large platforms like OpenSea that the space is currently fighting against. Then you have artists were begging to get onto the invitation-only platforms like Super Rare and Non-Origin, which a lot of people are calling curated platforms, and it's not curated. It's commercial platform, just needing to make money. And more recently, then like, you know, Maria, Paula, and even like Mocha with Colborne have like really like worked on infrastructure and curation layers that are like added on top of like these minting platforms and blockchain. So it is a great start, but it's also like there's so many artists compared to like curated like small like even like gallery websites that like these infrastructures like MP is doing is like it allows curation to scale and like to really help artists like by keeping also like a sort of a decentralized way to curate. So so I think that's also like you know, a question on like who can be curator, and I know this is like a big debate, but it's also like you know, how can curators be rewarded, their contribution being considered, like for them to actually help more artists? Because so far, like, you know, we haven't seen many galleries, academics, I mean, it's very new, but like galleries were really helping on the primary market, like artists to explain their work, explain their processes, and now they're kind of left on their own. And I think we just should acknowledge that, like, they're super confused.
Can I add something to Fanny's point? Well, you know, we have discussed a lot in the, you know, in the NFT world about this intermediation, how, you know, we get together the artists and the collectors and there's no middleman. Actually, you know, middlemen in the art world are, as you guys know much better than I do, not necessarily bad. They do the press, as Fanny said, they do a bunch of things for discovery. You know, they help educate collectors as well, and they do all sorts of different kinds of support that we're not even considering, because, you know, this is a more straightforward market, and the viewing experience is what you get in a browser. So, you know, all in all, what we're trying to build here, curation platforms are more focused on curation, like my platform JPEG or like Mocha, is not sufficient, because there's a lot of inbound from new NFTs, from new 10K PFP projects that, you know, you can consider them art or not. That's, you know, not my problem. But it's impossible right now to actually generate proper discovery and support and only rely on the professionals. We need to also educate the audience to create their own selections and to know how to differentiate. And some people will also arise as new classes of creatives that are, you know, creating selections for other people, that are helping others on board. While obviously the professionals should have and must have their own space to create more, you know, like, I don't like this term, but, you know, we can say more educated or elevated or whatnot viewing experiences, because, you know, there's different tiers to NFTs, as there's different tiers to you know, traditional art world. And to Amir's point, you know, I don't like people. I think the work that he does is absolutely horrifying. Most of the things are very noisy. I have no idea why people like them, but to be honest, you know, there's highly commercial and zero zero good concept pieces in the traditional art world too, and they will always exist. So, you know, we need to sort of, you know, be able to be welcoming to everything. You know, truth is, this is a sort of like affluent ecosystem as well in terms of money flow. So yeah, there's room for everyone here.
Thank you, Maria. So what I'm wondering, I mean, yeah, there's the critique that, you know, the artists want now to be, you know, to have a drop, I don't know, a super rare or nifty gateway, which somehow are now the new gatekeepers, or artists want, you know, are looking for invitations for foundation and so on and so on. So we all are very well aware of that. But I mean, what can we actually contribute? What could new ways of curating look like? Does anyone here on stage? I mean, Maria is actively working on that with her project, and Sam Spike, thank you also for tuning in, who's also working with Maria on JPEG. Jason, Tina, Kate, do you have ideas what new ways of curating in the space could look like, especially when it comes to platforms?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm excited about. I tend to agree with Tina that digital art's been around for a long time, and there are those of us that have studied it for a long time and have been passionate about it, and that NFTs haven't really fundamentally changed. The fact that digital art has been around, I don't think we're seeing that much new yet. Although I tend to agree that we're seeing some stuff new in digital art this year. What's exciting is that we're seeing a social phenomena. As someone who's been nerdy and into digital art for 25, 30 years, I've usually gone to dinners, tried to talk about this stuff, and people kind of just yawn and walk away. And that's been true. That might be more a reflection of me than digital art, by the way. But what's exciting about the last year and a half or so is that we now have tons and tons of interest in digital art via NFTs, right? And you can argue whether NFTs are a great vehicle or not a great vehicle. But we have this opportunity as people that maybe have been passionate or interested in this space longer to kind of build around that and leverage our expertise in a way that I think is useful to empower other people. And I guess the analogy that I kind of think of sometimes is like, people might hate this, but I kind of compare art to sports, because sometimes people will say, well, these people can't be artists because they're not trained, or they can't be curators because they're not trained. You wouldn't have like an astronaut or a surgeon that wasn't trained. But for me, I look at art more like sports, in that if I'm driving down past someone playing basketball who's like 10 years old and not very good or out of shape, I don't hate them for not being good at playing basketball, right? I actually love that they're playing the sport that I love, and I know they're on a journey. They're in a process where they're trying to become a better artist or a better curator. And I think what's exciting with this influx of interest is that we can open up the opportunity to these people, at whatever stage they're at. I often hear that, the work's really busy or loud or not that great. Well, most people start out making work that's probably not great by many people's standards, but we have to accept and allow for that. People are at different points in their journey, and encourage them, I think, is part of it, right? So I think part of how curating can change, or what we can look at in terms of curation, is not holding it back as something that people can't dabble in or try. Like, people have to be able to try their hands at making art and curation, and it may be pretty bad, or it may look kind of meaningless or thin to some people that have been doing it longer. But that's the first baby steps towards developing a serious and longer term interest. And I think so the big thing is the social phenomenon and all the new interest. And my hope is that as folks that have varying degrees of expertise, that we're really welcoming and encouraging people along those journeys, and don't feel so obliged to point out that it's not necessarily the best work or the best curation, and instead sort of kind of handhold a bit where it's helpful or wanted or needed. So yeah, I think that's the way that I'm looking at it.
Hey, Artnome, I tend to agree with you. I guess the only big difference here is that usually when you see the kid at the basketball court, like trying, but not maybe doing a good job, like you feel good about it, but then that kid doesn't go and get like a Kobe Bryant's salary, and be coveted as like, one of the best in the field of basketball when they're clearly not. And I think the market aspect of this is one of the biggest problems, because like I'm sure you can look at work and you're like, oh, that's derivative of like these 30 different artists, and this person clearly hasn't looked at work clearly or thought about art in a deep manner. But in this space, because the people that are buying it, for the most part, weren't thinking about art even a couple of years ago, and there's this huge financial benefit, it deters that young artist from wanting to learn more or develop more. It almost stunts their growth. I mean, I can think of one major NFT artist who, should probably go to school or like make work before making, tens of millions of dollars off work that's clearly derivative to anyone with, basic art knowledge. And they're being championed as like the next Picasso and, just these really ridiculous things. to me, that actually hurts the NFT space. It doesn't help grow it. It makes those that believe in it not take it, not want to take it seriously or like step away from it. So I think that's one of the biggest problems in this space is how do you foster growth while still letting people know that, hey, like maybe you need to work on your work. Maybe you shouldn't sell it just because you can. And then also try to educate collectors in a way where they realize that them saying something's great isn't the only reason, isn't the way that like you decide what good or important art is. Because people are, a couple of days ago, I had a guy tell me, I've made millions of dollars as an analyst in the art, analyzing JPEGs. I know more than curators, which is like this. I'm like, there isn't art analysts, first of all, they're called curators or historians. So there's just all these like this mixture of finance and art is like butting heads in a way that's never happened before because it's so easy to sell NFTs. And I'm not sure what the quick solution to it is.
Honestly, I want to touch on this if I can. This is exactly what I meant when I mentioned that we see a lot of commercialization of culture and even more than before, even though, it started many decades ago, this kind of boosting contemporary art and monetizing from that quite quickly. Money market making in a traditional art world, but I just want to touch on a couple of things, like the original idea of the whole democratization of art, and when the blockchain as a technology found its place, many years ago, like let's say 2014, 15, 16, and we saw the development of first marketplaces. The idea was very utopian and very very humble and nice and really exciting. And like an art and text place was really like, I like the comparison that Alfred said was like romantic in a sort of way, because everybody was friendly to each other. Everybody was supporting the whole idea of let's connect the artist to the collector directly. Let's eliminate all the middlemen, all the middle women, all the dealers, curators. We don't need that because we just want to link one to another. And that was a beautiful idea and beautiful business concepts for all the marketplaces, because they came into place and they say, hey, we are not the galleries. We are just here to serve you artists and to enable you to get all these royalties from the secondary market with technology called blockchain. And that was revolutionary. And that's what kind of democratized, if we can use this word now, the market place, right? But all those platforms, only Super Rare, I think, back at the time saw that the importance of curation is vital, and that like they regulated and also limited a little bit the acceptance of artists on on their platform and stuff like that. But majority like OpenSea, Known Origin, Rarible, etc., the ones who've been quite early portion, I'm not going to name all of them, they've been accepting all the artists, and they didn't have the resources back at the time to curate the space or to differentiate, and if you look, if you would have looked at all the marketplaces, you could know immediately who are the artists who are known in the space, you didn't need the guidance, you didn't need the curation, because you as a collector, as a new to the space, you did have an opportunity to look around and figure out by yourself what talks to you, what you feel connection with, because there were not so many people in the space. With pandemic and with all the acceleration and obviously the traditional art market and big auction houses, looking at the space because of a pandemic, they had to make they saw the opportunity. They know that there is potentially a lot of profit out of this, and during the pandemic, like they also can sell and they can profit, and and then they supposed to do a good curatorial job, right? They supposed as a institution of this caliber, like a museum or an auction house, particularly Sotheby's or Christie's, that is their primarily job to actually curate. And what does it mean, curate? In general, it's to choose, to carefully choose the right artworks and thoughtfully organize, the exhibition, and look at the value and at the artistic value, not at the price or how quickly we can make money and how we can link one collector to another, make millions, and the hell with the quality of artwork. Nobody cares, because we have to justify our gaps in the books because we lost so much money because of a pandemic. And that's what happened. And I think, like in 2020, 2021, we've seen a lot of commercialization further, of the space. But no, we should not forget that, like we are all learning, and this ideal romantic model of democratizing the market and just linking the artist and collector does not work. And everybody already realized it all the way back to last 2-3 years, that, hey, we need the curators. Also marketplaces, they are just they calling themselves like marketplaces, but actually they are dealers, they are the galleries, so we are not eliminating the middleman or middlewoman. We just keep and call all the other participants different names, but everybody, what has been blurry is the purpose and the how do you say, like who does what. The artist is wearing different hats, playing an auctioneer and the marketer and the salesperson, and also trying to curate his own drops, and really overwhelmed with all the things that he has to take care of. The marketplace continues doing the matchmaking between the artist and the collector, but also recognizing that the curatorial part is very vital. And then the dealers and the galleries like me, also trying to find the space, how you can support the artist and guide them through the space and introduce them to the marketplaces, that they are not so scared to get on board, and you can help them to navigate. And because this space is still relatively new, even though we have a tremendous growth for the last couple of years, we are still like little kittens, going through the stages of what the traditional art market has been through already for many centuries, and we are just now recognizing that, yes, we need a good curation, yes, we actually need dealers, or yes, we need guidance, but we call them different, like the guys who are doing the analytics, it's literally the dealers, in the traditional art market. And the curators, we have to be probably still define the terminology of how we define the curator. If anybody can be a curator, then it's also a democratization, right? Because you kind of don't limit yourself, to do any kind of job. And I think, like everybody can try and curate and create and different stuff, like at the same time. And maybe you are much more successful than the museum curators. But when we look and complain and saying like, oh, the Beeple sale took place because we still look at the curatorial from the older perspective. And when we say, oh, it should be curated, we still look for some sort of higher institution to validate and to be credible enough to validate the value of work. And because in our space, this validation of quality of work is a bit blurry, because collectors became dealers and galleries, and they also create their own exhibitions online, like the artists also became collectors and flippers, and also can curate. So the line of who is doing what, it became so blurry that we are a little bit getting lost in the space, and maybe we just need, we will eventually come by time to the same sort of model, unfortunately, as we are now divided in the traditional art world, that everybody is still doing majority of the time their job, what they have to do, because you cannot just do everything at the same time and keep the level of equality to deliver to the expectations of the audience. And maybe also at the same time to look, how we validate the credibility of a curator and who can validate the quality of artwork. Because like 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it was a museum. Like, if your work has made it to the museum, oh my God, the artist was like, straight away, I'm in a museum collection. Top, then it became, with the shift of the art market, it became a bit again changed, because then private collectors became so wealthy, and private collectors build up so many private museums that
Kate,
they became a validator. No,
Kate, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but we have a few people that are like raising their hands, and I also
sure,
wanted
but you can just interrupt me and shut me up, no problem.
And that happened.
I also wanted, sorry,
Oh.
Tina, before everybody speaks, I also wanted to introduce Lady Phoenix that we have up as a speaker, and to just give her an opportunity to actually like introduce herself and say hello as well. Lady Fee, can you hear us? Oh. No, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. Can anybody hear her, or is it just me? Okay.
No, we can't hear her either.
No, okay, awesome. Go ahead, Tina, then. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, obviously I have a lot of thoughts about everything that has been said so far. So I'll try to keep this brief. I'll just say that I don't disagree with the idea that everyone, can have an opinion, and, what Jason was saying about, valuing and inviting people to feel sort of authorized, right, to participate and to care and to be invested in this thing that we all care about and are invested in very much. That said, I think we need to be a little more nuanced when we, decide what we mean when we say curate, right? And, Kate was talking about curation and these platforms that are essentially curatorial platforms. And I just think that we're still mobilizing the word curate as if it simply is a synonym for selection. And that's not really fundamentally what, let's say, institutional curating is about, right? That's part of it. But it's also a research-based practice. And I want to preface what I'm saying by saying that just as there are many art worlds, there are many kinds of curating and many kinds of curators. Some of us are a little more academic and make historically oriented exhibitions. Some of us are more like project managers and like producing new projects by contemporary artists. So I'm not trying to flatten anything. That's exactly it, actually. I feel like I'm resisting this flattening that is happening where curating is being reduced to selection. And so there is a model of curatorial work that is about deeply researching objects, which means studio visits with artists. It means reading, interviews, previous publications, reviews. It means writing reviews. It means learning about an entire area of thought that might be outside of the art world, actually, entirely, whether it's machine learning or climate change. Like, there's research that goes into it, not to mention, the tools and canon of art history. And this takes time. And I think that one thing that has been lost a little bit in all of the pressure to immediately have, institutional curators. Like, I mean, on Twitter a year ago, people were saying, well, where are the museum shows? And it's like, well, the show that I have open right now, I developed for 2 years. And that was considered a short timeline. Like, when I used to work at the Met Museum, there were people at the Met who worked on exhibitions for 10 years. So I hear what people are saying about the democratization. I think it's great. But I think that what actually is happening is that what I'm hearing is a kind of pushing out or an erasing of the kind of curatorial work that institutions can do. This rich, deep research, whether it's like closely working with these objects and thinking about them over time spans that are weeks or months or years. I'm hearing constantly that this is, that the work that we do is elitist, that it is gatekeeping, et cetera. And so I sort of want to make the inverse point of what Jason was saying, which is that, like, can we make sure to hold space not just for the 10-year-old on the basketball court, but also for the basketball coach, who actually also has something that's valuable to the conversation, and invite that basketball coach in to participate in these conversations, and not just assume that this 10-year-old actually is inherently more valuable or has a more valuable perspective than the coach, simply because the coach happens to have some type of institutional pedigree. Like, I just don't understand this rush to dismiss certain forms of knowledge. What I would like to see is an opening up where all of these forms of knowledge, all of these forms of investment, and even, let's say, expertise can sort of coexist. And so somebody else was this, and I'll wrap up here, but to go back to, like, Alfred's point about it took the auction houses to make this work legitimate in contemporary art. It was actually the artists first. Like, I think if you go back and you look at the show Proof of Work at the Schinkel Pavilion in Berlin in 2018, that was, co-curated by this distributed network of people, including Simon Denny and Harm van den Dorpel. Like, I always say, like, I follow the artists and the artists lead, and it is my job to amplify the work that they do. And I think artists actually have been their best advocates in this space. And I think that, when we think about what curating can mean, I think that we should actually look at what artists are saying about what curating can mean, right? And so thinking about that as a model where you have a distributed network of people who work together over time to build a project together that is meaningful and makes an argument. That is what I would like to see more of emerging from this space. And not simply sort of this flattening of what curating can mean into just a selection made by a NFT platform.
Boom.
Tina,
Amir,
can I just chime in? Tina,
go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just add to what Tina was saying, because I think there's also a growing group of artists who are interested in NFTs, such as myself, who want that level of, thought put into even something as simple as text being written about work. I mean, most artists don't even bother writing a description for their work. And I found this really interesting thing happening in the space over the last, like, 6 months, where a lot of my friends who are from the traditional art world but have been in the new media space, they're all slowly gravitating towards Tezos instead of ETH, because on the ETH platforms, everything is so hyper focused on how much you buy something and sell it for, and not about ideas or content or meaning or anything that has to do really with art. And I keep discovering more and more artists on the Tezos space, and there's even groups of us that are kind of, because there's no curation, there's no gallery, there's no structure, it's just anything goes. We're kind of taking it upon ourselves, almost like a artist run project space, and curating our own shows, because there is no infrastructure in place to talk about work in in some sort of formal and intelligent manner. Like, I've never heard a space where people are talking about what the work means or why it's important. It's always about the floor price, so-and-so collector bought it, flipped it for this much, they're at Christie's, they're at Sotheby's. And it's like, those of us that come from the art world, nobody likes the auction houses, the traditional auction houses. Galleries go out of their way, and artists go out of their way to make contracts to avoid having work to go to auction. I won't sell my work to anyone that'll put my work on auction within 5 years. So somehow these traditional auction houses have become the pinnacle of the traditional art world, when in reality, everyone's trying hard to not go there as long as possible. So it's, I think we need people like Tina and other people who can kind of put context and kind of say, all right, NFT art is just a part of the art world, but there's a much wider world that informs how this little niche, functions.
Yeah. I also think that's very, very true. Also, thank you for your points, Tina. That's really how I also feel like that. It's just I mean, many artists do great research and know about a lot of things, but I mean, you can't do as much research as a curator who's full-time into researching and knowing about the history of artworks. You just can't compete with that. And also having the outside perspective. When I was working with Anika on my show for Königgalerie, it was it lifted the exhibition to a whole new level. So I think that's really an important distinction to make between like full-time curators and people like myself. Also, I'm an artist, I'm putting a show together. That's cool, but I do it from a completely different perspective. And then even looking at public institutions like Alfred Weidinger's museums, it's also a really valuable thing. And I'm really thankful also for the curators who are willing to learn about all the tech stuff, because looking back 10 years ago, there were only artists, because it's also super hard to understand. I don't know what the difference between ETH and Tezos is or something like that. And I'm super happy about these discussions right now. And what I also would like to point out is that back then, before the NFT craze, with all the valuable criticism about like prices and everything, I think like very few people before had the perspective to even continue working on what they wanted to work on, because it was simply not possible. Because many exhibitions I made with artists who years later stopped doing art because they had a family and had to work their day jobs. And I'm really happy that some of them returned now to this new space, because it's possible again. And also many of them are on Tezos, and finding new artists through the wallets of other artists, that's also a wonderful thing to do.
And the funny thing is, when Alfred Weidinger and I did the first, I think that was the first 2 museum exhibitions, the reaction from the press was like always, oh, does this have to be in a museum? You know, does this art made by artists who have grown up on social media and who probably rose to fame through social media and, you know, are mostly familiar with social media, do these people, and does this have to be a museum? Why do they do that? And when Jesse and Alfred were working on the exhibition and were thinking about the title, then, you know, the title is now Proof of Art. And I was like, are you sure? Do we have to prove that this is art? Is this a good choice for a title? And I'm really glad they went ahead with it. But I was very skeptical. Well, do we have to say that in the title, that this is art you're showing in the museum? So yeah. And also to what Manuel said, I mean, I as a curator, I learned a lot through working with Manuel on his exhibitions, and we still speak like sort of daily and exchange ideas and thoughts on the topic. And for me, it's like really helpful to be in touch with an artist who is sort of always ahead of its time and learn from him, because I guess that's very important, because I can't code and stuff. So I really need his input and his thoughts, and I need Manuel to explain things to me which I wouldn't be able to understand from a tech perspective. Yes, thank you, Manuel, for your time always, and for your thoughts and input.
Can I just say, really,
yeah,
like,
sure.
for the benefit, like I think most of the speakers probably aware of this, but if there are people who are listening who aren't aware, I just want to point out that 10 years ago there absolutely were curators who knew about technology. 30 years ago, there were people like Johnny Bolito and Christiana Paul and Sarah Cook. And if people aren't aware that there's like an entire subfield of curatorial studies that is dedicated to curating digital art. So you can find books by Christiana Paul and Sarah Cook or Annette Decker that are about the field specifically of curating digital art. So I just, you know, I just want to be clear that like this is a conversation that actually has been unfolding for a while now. And I take the point that, you know, institutional acceptance wasn't as wide as it could have been or should have been, and that it's been sort of a niche community for a long time, but it's not a community without a history. So when we're saying like, well, what does it look like to curate digital art? It's like, well, I don't know, maybe we should ask some of the people who have been doing this since the 90s.
One question that I wanted to ask that kind of picks up that thread is that the NFT market, maybe the key difference in the when we compare it to the way the general art market functions is a certain degree of transparency around the transaction, which is not to say that the identity of the buyers and sellers is necessarily always clear. but there's this kind of front-loaded aspect of the market and the commercialization of the work. And so if that is one of the primary differences in curating NFT art, the sort of natural next question I then have for the room is that a good thing for curating? Is the front-loaded aspect of the market component of the art good for curating?
I mean, Jesse, could you just clarify, like, what do you think it has to do with curating at all? Because literally, aside from like knowing who to ask to loan the work to me, I don't see it as being particularly relevant. And frankly, as you said, because wallets can be, I mean, they're public but anonymized, it actually can make it harder for me to do my job in terms of securing the loans that I need to include a work in a show.
Totally. The other thing that I'm sort of thinking about is somebody had made the point that the way the gallery model has worked in the past, there's been an aspect of shielding artists from the kind of what we might call like the grosser aspects of capitalism that are involved in their work. And now when we think more about artists working in concert with institutions, curators, etc., if they are selling NFTs, there might be some component where they're facing the market component of their work and other people are seeing what those reflections in the market are. If a curator sees that an artist has sold a large number of works at a very high price point, that might influence how they think about curating more work from that artist in the future in negative and positive ways.
Not if they're a good curator. I mean, just to give some people some context, like as I mentioned before, I have an exhibition on view right now. It's a sort of major survey of digital art since the 90s. 17 artists in the show, 19 works. Of the 17, I think 3 have gallery representation. So the work that curators do, and I'm not going to be naive here and say that institutions are totally divorced from the concerns of the market. Obviously, we're all sort of part of a community, and there are many kinds of networks and alliances and allegiances and friendships, etc., that influence the work that we all do. But I mean, like a work's marketability and artist sales record honestly has nothing to do with how I've ever curated anything. Like, I mean, I curated the first museum solo show of the artist Aria Dean, and at that time she had no major sales records, like no major gallery representation. This was before she started working with Green Naftali. So yeah, I think that there's this idea that the curators, their work is much more influenced by the market or reflects the market than it does. And I think this goes back to Amir's point, and I'm so glad that he made it. It's a point that I've tried to make over and over. I think people outside the quote unquote mainstream contemporary art world keep conflating the art market with the art world, when the art market is simply one subset of a larger art world that includes critics, historians, professors, people who work at publications, art handlers. Like, there's a much bigger community of people who are invested in and promote contemporary art that aren't immediately working in a market context or in a commercial context.
I also want to add on this point that I actually think that from what Jesse and Tina are just saying, that it's not even it's more of a matter of sometimes, especially within the NFT space, and if you're working natively in this space, the work of I'm going to put it in speech marks because maybe curator or selector, or whenever you're pulling up an exhibition that is native to the NFT space, the successfulness of your work is based off of how much the work sells for. And this is because I think people in the space, collectors, etc., have no real education that comes from, and critique as well, of the artworks that are being sold. And so their eye, it's almost like they aren't trained to see different work, and they don't know what is, I don't want to say good work versus bad work, but at least work that comes from some practice, and work that comes from a lot of good marketing, maybe. And so to this point, it's like, how do you train a space that has not really kind of like accepted any critique, and how do you like allow for critique to happen in not in like a gatekeeping way, but in a positive way where it can provoke good feedback and actually help the market?
If nobody's going to say anything, I'll just say I do think people should look at what Outland is doing as an outlet for offering this kind of feedback and critique and critical thinking about the art that's emerging from this space. And I'm curious to hear if other people have other suggestions.
I've been thinking a little bit on the problem of critique, and obviously we need the professionals, and I also agree with Tina here that Outland is such a wonderful platform. Shout out to Brian that's here listening to us. I think that in the NFT space we have to create a different kind of critics that not only know about art history but also know about market, about manipulation, and about different kind of elements that have just arisen together with the NFT surge. It would be really disingenuous to criticize people without understanding that there has been a degree of really open, widespread market manipulation, and how can you not add that to your critique as well? Should you separate the critique from all of these kind of events happening in the space? Should you not? I think this is a collective sort of discussion that we should have, and adapt the criticisms of the previous digital art scene to what happens right now, which is like a lot of exposure to different financial instruments, market mechanisms, the direct influence from collectors towards artists to create different pieces or to turn their practices otherwise, and beyond.
Just adding something to what you said, MP. I think the reference to Outland is great because it's a critique, but like that takes into account like its audience, and that adapts to maybe like shorter pieces or like artist profile, like kind of digestible, because to educate more collectors and people who are looking at what's available, like we also need them to read it and pay attention. And we all know that like maybe most people don't have like this attention span to like read an entire like critique. Like, I mean, I wish they all did, but probably not. And we're in a very interesting, like, just going back to like what we were saying about the monetization, the art market versus the art world. Absolutely. And it's very interesting that like we actually, with NFTs, like the crypto art started at the market, like with like most emphasis on the values, like obviously like having like the loudest, not the best one by all means, but like the loudest artists being the ones with the most financial value. And now we're trying to re-inject and like make sure that like we don't just have a market with financial values, but also a meaningful like art world for like crypto art, or like whatever we want to call it for now. And it's a great challenge because it's also when we can redefine ways or like to curate, like, and ways to critique, and we need way more outlets out there than like I mean, it's a great start, but like we need more academics, we need more like people writing about that, and from the tech and the art history perspective.
Well, I mean, I think so too. And shout out to Brian and Outland and critics and compelling stories and reflection and everything. On the other hand, I also think that there are groups out there that celebrate their artists and their arts. I think that's also maybe the other side of the coin, if you like, of democratization as well. I mean, I can appreciate teenagers making nice paintings sometimes, not all of them, of course, but maybe there's value in it. Who knows what happens in 20 years? And if it's, I don't know, rich kids with lots of ETH, I don't know, celebrating each other, maybe it's not good for the community. And I would also criticize the possibility of, I don't know, spending so much money on some of those NFTs, but it's a larger criticism of like inequality maybe. But on the other hand, the possibility of it and the openness of the market allows for that. Sometimes I wish more education, more interest from the people, but I think in general it's part of it, and I would rather accept it, but also hold up high standards in that I don't know, offer of art that maybe us and my peers are creating. But I think like condemning teenagers for doing their thing, or like the way it works in this I don't know, faster parts, I think it's part of the game. So yeah.
And maybe it would also be interesting to hear from Alfred Weidinger if and how the art market interferes, because Tina rightly said, well, the art world is not the art market, vice versa. But then, I mean, sometimes the art market interferes with museums. I mean, I would be interested in hearing what Alfred Weidinger has to say about that topic. Are you, as a museum director, influenced by what you want to show and what you're showing in the museum?
You mean from the art market or from dealers, whatever? No, definitely not.
Both.
It's a really,
dealers market.
Yeah, whatever. Not really. It's a really thing to artists. So this is of course we have contact with art dealers and galleries when you deal with some artists. So they are represented from galleries, and you have to deal. Of course, this is necessary, but we are completely free in programming our house, our museum, our exhibitions. So we are listening to artists. So it also very much like what Tina said. So it's definitely effect. So we really have to focus more on artists than on the market.
With that, I think we've got some people lined up requesting to ask questions. So I'm going to go ahead and pull Wade up. It's not. All right, Wade, are you with us?
Hello. Hey, guys.
Hello.
The thing that, just listening to this whole conversation, the thing that came to mind for me was, that in thinking about curation and its role in this ecosystem, it's, I don't think it's a conversation versus of traditional methodologies versus new methodologies. I think that like what needs to be considered at the end of the day is really proximity to the artworks and experience of them. We clearly are in a media moment where the volume of visual material is overwhelming, impossible to sift through. And I had a really amazing conversation with Ria Myers yesterday, who is a blockchain artist, as Anika would say, a wallet artist, and who, was really talking to me about the role of how do I explain this?
Is it just me or is Wade on?
Oh,
I can't hear anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add briefly, Ria Myers, I would call that crypto art. I mean, art that deals with the blockchain and uses the blockchain as a method, or like Kevin Bosch would say it. that's crypto art, and then what I coined in an article for wallet art is probably what people started calling NFT art. So art that's made to live on marketplaces and in people's wallets, like, you know, that has to have certain, I don't know, aesthetics or criteria, like the perfect loop and so on and so on. So Wade, does your mic work again, or your internet connection? Are you with us again? I mean, I see you on stage, but the mic is switched off now.
We have quite a lot of questions and requests, and we're already like 90 minutes in. So we might just take one more, and we're actually going to be doing these like weekly chats. So we're going to have another one on Tuesday. But yeah, I'll just take the first person that I have on. So it's, hey Visnesh, can you hear us?
Hi, I just cut out when you pulled me up here. Am I allowed to speak right now?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me up here, and Micol, it's great to hear your voice. I haven't been in one of your rooms for a long time. Just wishing you a happy new year, and I love seeing your residency program take off and all of that. It's really exciting to see. And I also just wanted to present the question. I know we've been talking about this throughout this room, but like right now, I know we've been talking a lot about how, you know, the whole NFT movement has opened up just the whole collecting ability to, and it's totally democratized that. And that's been very interesting. And there's kind of this like, I think a lot of smaller time collectors are kind of doing their own curation on their own. And then there's like Sotheby's and Christie's that are at the very top of this market. And like in the in-between, it's still, I feel like it's still wide open, kind of the Wild West, and it's still being figured out right now. So I just wanted to ask the question to this group, if there are any opinions or bold predictions for 2022 on who might be taking up that space and who are the players to watch there. So anyways, I'll drop down to the audience. Thanks for letting me speak.
Can I do a crystal ball prediction?
Please.
Of course.
I mean, we were talking just before that call with Charlotte, who was listening before, about artists and creation DAOs, and not because they're DAOs and it's the next acronym of 2022, blah blah blah, but just because it was very interesting to see groups of artists like self-organize to tell their story and kind of change the discourse of like the louder individual artist is the most like successful one. And there are tons of examples from like Her Story DAO, Agenda DAO, like a million others that I probably don't know. But I think this is like where going back to like being close to and listening to the artist, like this is great to like would really pay attention to the what they collect, what their like artist DAOs. Like I'm not talking about treasury DAOs with collectors like putting funds together. That's different. But really like looking at like collections and exhibitions from artist communities. That would be my prediction.
Fanny, I totally agree with you. I think artists are starting to come together. I know myself and several other friends had been having with some of the people in the Tezos community having very informal art talks. And the more we started talking about art and art history, we realized many of the artists and the collectors did not have, extensive exposure to this. And my friend Sky Nicholas, who's in the audience, and another friend, Elmo, they put together a documentary, an art documentary space where they pick out a documentary every every week, and everybody watches it, and then we have a discussion about it. And I think the last one, we watched a BBC documentary about Jeff Koons, who most people in the art world know quite a bit about, but a lot of the people in the NFT space don't know anything about him. They just know he's a famous artist. And we had, I think it was like a 3 or 3.5 hour conversation about Jeff Koons and conceptual art and his, fabrication and and it was wonderful. And it was completely organic. It came out of a couple of friends talking, and I think there was over 100 people there. And I think that's going to happen more and more because, the wonderful thing about NFTs is that it's pure chaos and very experimental and anything goes, but it's also like the worst part about it because there's no infrastructure and, so you just have to start everything from scratch. And again, me and Sky Nicholas and a couple of other people were starting to put together, I guess they're not really shows because they're not in a space and we're not doing like a virtual space, but group releases where like-minded artists are kind of coming together and writing about the work and the meaning and, having like just adding more structure to it. So it's not purely a monetary transaction, but it's putting the focus back on the art. And I think we're going to see quite a bit more of that in the coming years.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Can I?
Maria, go ahead.
Problem.
Sure.
No,
go ahead.
Okay.
No, we just wanted to close, but
yeah.
you are the last one to make a comment statement, and then we close the room because we're way over 90 minutes now.
Yeah, so we have seen the surge of, sort of curated drops in like own platforms that were, doubling as marketplaces, and of course, the huge marketplaces as well. But with the advent of, platforms like Mocha or, JPEG, of course, and super rare spaces as well, I'm seeing a lot of extra infrastructure that's gonna help professionals and enthusiasts. As I mentioned before, we have to be open to everyone. And I am very excited about seeing all this complementary infrastructure from, the more focused on the art one to the ones that are properly financial instruments, like, floor sweeping sort of artifacts or exchanges. Oh, sorry, I dropped one of my headphones. Or exchanges for NFTs, P2P platforms to generate the exchange as well. So there's a little bit of everything, but I think it's more themed around infrastructure and educating people into different behaviors beyond, transactional. And yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
All right. On that note, first, thank you to the amazing speakers. Everybody in the crowd, if you can throw up your favorite reaction for these awesome speakers for spending over 90 minutes of their day joining us. And one other thing that Anika teased is we'll be doing this weekly. Next week, we're taking on the inevitable PFP conversation and diving into that a little bit from an art historical perspective. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. That'll be Tuesday at the same time. So 8 p.m. CET and 11 a.m. Pacific Coast. So that makes it 2 p.m. East Coast US. With that, again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all the speakers and look forward to talking soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a nice
Bye.
evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.